Hey guys, in today's video we're going to be checking out the new M1 MacBook Air. And as you can see here, the Air hasn't really changed much from the old design, but nevertheless still looks modern and new. So let's go ahead and open it up. And it is instant on. So the second you open it, the second is on. So first things first, let me show you guys how I spec'd out my Air. And the reason I decided to go with this is because I'm planning on keeping this for a long while. So I wanted to spec it reasonably well where I can enjoy it, 2-3 years from now. So I went ahead and upgraded to the 16 GB memory RAM. And Apple's RAM is a unified, it's all in one chip. So the graphics and the cores and the RAM are all together. And that's what makes the M1 quite unique. But not only that, I decided to do the 500 gigabyte SSD because owning a laptop before with 256, it feels way too cramped for my taste, especially for what I'm going to use this machine for, mostly video editing and things like that. So this is the 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU, 16 GB RAM with 512 SSD in space gray is all of the options that I chose. And with all those options, the price was close to $1,400 with tax. So not cheap by any means. Now with that said, you can buy just the base Mac for $999, or you can use the educational website, get it for $899, $100 less, and that makes it an incredible deal for what it is. So one of the things that were a little disappointing about this Mac is the only 2 Thunderbolt USB ports on the left side, and so that kind of limits you how much you can plug into it. But the limitation doesn't come from the internal logics themselves, because you can split those 2 into 4 and still have your 4 like you would normally have on the older ones. So just keep that in mind, but you will need adapters to do that. And on the right side, we get a 3.5mm headphone port. So it's kind of nice to see that they kept that. Now, one of the most significant things about the Air is that it does not have a cooling fan on the inside to cool the CPU and GPU, whatever. And this makes it very, very interesting and quite a different experience than what we're normally used to in laptops. So if you ever had an iPad, think of this as an iPad in a laptop form where it's silent no matter what you do. Now with that, there is some compromise, which you will get some throttling of performance if you do very heavy tasks like video rendering for, over 10 minutes or whatever, big projects. But overall, for normal use, there's not any difference because the M1 is so efficient, it doesn't create much heat. And this makes the Air very unique, and I feel like is one of the best features that it has. Now, another feature that's pretty mind-blowing, and that has to do with the optimized M1 chip, is the battery life. Because the M1 is so efficient, it doesn't require much power, so this gives the new Air, under normal usage with halfway brightness on the screen, 18 hours from one charge, which is pretty mind-blowing. We're having iPad style performance, or even better, and a laptop, but I find myself getting about 10 to 12, maybe 14, depending on what I do. So if you do more heavier rendering and you have your screen brighter, you're obviously gonna fall below that. So this thing will get you through the day on a single charge. So on the new M1 here, we have the Retina display, pretty much the same resolution, but what really changed is the wide color P3 gamut, which gives you more natural depth colors. So very good for video and photo editors, and pretty much required if you do any kind of professional work. Now with that said, the Air is not as bright as the Pro. Right now we are about half brightness, and if I turn this up, it'll be too bright for you guys, but this is its brightest mode here, and it does pretty well. But if you take it outside in direct sunlight, you might start having a little bit of issue seeing. But if you're indoors mostly, it can pretty much handle ambient lighting, no issues. I'm gonna turn this down a bit. But yeah, overall I love the screen, and just like in Apple fashion, it's beautiful and nothing to complain here. So going down here, we can see the keyboard, and it is backlit. Let's see if we can adjust it a little brighter. Okay, yes, it's not all the way up, but I'll just go ahead and put it up. And they went back to the Magic Keyboard away from the butterfly, which I absolutely like, because this is going to be reliable and nothing like the plagued butterfly keys of the past. So I'm very happy to see that they went to the Magic Keyboard. But what's kind of interesting here is that they also included a Touch ID. So whenever you have to unlock this thing, instead of typing a password in, you can just touch it here and it unlocks, and it works very good. Like, I had never any issues with unlocking it. Once I set up my fingerprint, I just tap on it and it opens like every time. So I really like the Touch ID. It's very fast and efficient. And also, not to mention this really nice touchpad here. and it's quite large, definitely good enough to pretty much do anything. And it is the same design as comes on the fancy Pros and everything else. So it's a, you know, touch sensitive and very accurate mouse pad here that, you know, would not disappoint, and Apple knows how to make those. So let's quickly talk about performance and compatibility and things like that. So because this is the new M1, which is the ARM architecture M1 chip, there's a lot of things that are optimized. So if you use Final Cut Pro, Pro Logic, all the apps that are native to Apple, you're gonna have a flawless experience on the M1, or for the most part. Now, because this computer is quite new, you know, things are still being optimized and worked out, so keep that in mind. But overall, the experience is pretty amazing. Now, when you start using apps that are not compatible or haven't been optimized for the M1, this is where Rosetta 2 comes in, where it takes the Windows type apps and converts them so the M1 can run them. And to my surprise, the Windows apps that do use the Rosetta to convert work very well on here, and surprisingly sometimes better than you would think. Now, not everything, you know, is optimized and works well, but most things work. And the interesting part is it's only going to get better as all these companies realize that the new Apple architecture is going to have a huge impact. So they're all going to start making compatible programs for this new Apple architecture. Also, speaking about compatibility, if we go to the App Store here, it's bigger maybe, you guys can see here that we have quite a few things that we can download. And what's interesting about the M1s is that they're optimized to use iOS apps, which is really interesting. So for some of you guys out there, this could be a huge deal. If you like certain iOS apps or use them or need them, all of a sudden now the M1 Max can actually run them, which is very impressive and shows where Apple is heading. And the other thing I want to touch on is gaming. So Apple here has their arcade, which is pretty cool, and you can, you know, pretty much subscribe to over 100 games for only $4.99 a month, which is quite a good deal if you really, you know, had only this device here as your main computer and, you know, you wanted to play some games. You do have that option. But the M1 here can do more than just arcade gaming from Apple. You could still run all your other games and it will work. Now, I wouldn't recommend the Air here for someone that does a lot of gaming. I would totally recommend looking into the MacBook Pro, which has more benefits in hardware and also has a fan to cool itself off, so you can, you know, sustain those heavy loads at much better frame rates for gaming. But nevertheless, the Air can definitely play some games, and we're going to try a simple game here that's actually emulated in Rosetta, so you guys can see that, you know, it's pretty capable. So I did download a game called Asphalt 9 here, and let's go ahead and open it. And this is emulated in Rosetta, so it does have to process it. So as you guys can see, it takes a few seconds to open, not immediate, because it does have to emulate it. So we can go ahead and blow that up, and all of a sudden here we got, you know, full screen view. When you do set this thing up, it actually asks you how you want to use it, and it does have iPad controls, but, you know, since we're on the M1, I put it as, you know, keyboard control. I'm not sure exactly how to get this thing started, but I just wanted to show you guys some graphics here. All right, so it's loading, I think. And the graphics on this game are pretty intense. There's a lot going on. And it does stutter a little bit here and there. I don't know if you guys can pick it up, but you probably will. The reason I chose this game because it is very heavy and it is going through Rosetta 2 right now. So this is a pretty intense combination here. And the reason I'm saying it is going through Rosetta is because this is the first thing I downloaded, and I tried to play it. It wouldn't let me do it until I downloaded Rosetta 2. So even though this is an Apple game, for some reason it was still requiring a Rosetta, and I'm thinking it was maybe the way it was built from scratch to be a game for multi-platforms, including Android devices. But in any case, you guys can see it runs, and yeah, there doesn't seem to be much stuttering, or there is a little bit of stuttering, but overall it's running really clean and very playable. And this is probably a really, you know, unoptimized, very bad example of what the M1 can do, but this just shows you that how compatible it is and how it's able to run something like this, even though, you know, theoretically it shouldn't. So let's go ahead and turn that off. And in today's world that we're living in, sometimes you need to use your webcam, or more often now than ever, but Apple still left the 720p, which is a little disappointing. I wish it was 1080, but they do have a dedicated engine that makes the picture quality better, so it did improve, even though the camera resolution stayed the same. So for the next part, I'm going to use the camera with the built-in microphone so you guys can hear and see what that looks like. And so here we are at the webcam, so this is what it looks like, and also what the microphones sound like of this MacBook Air. So I think overall they're pretty good and, you know, quite acceptable for doing conference calls and things like that. All right, and so as you guys can see, it's not so bad and sounds decent enough and definitely acceptable enough for those Zoom meetings. Also guys, the speakers here on the sides are actually not too bad either. And I'm going to play a little clip here of a video. So yeah, in my opinion, they sound pretty good and would be more than good enough for most things. But obviously, if you were more serious about your music, then you would just use the headphone jack with some headphones or even a wireless set. And so for the last part I want to talk about is Final Cut Pro. And what's interesting about Final Cut Pro is that it is optimized for the M1. And not only that, the M1 itself inherently has really powerful decoder. So if you're using any kind of really intense high-end codecs, the M1 here does an excellent job of editing them on the Final Cut Pro timeline. So the footage I have here is from a Sony a7S III, which is 10-bit 420 at 60 frames per second, and it's really smooth and pretty much perfect, which is quite amazing to see the little Air here being able to do such a high intensive kind of codec. And I even tried throwing the 124K at it and it'll still do it fine, but it does start to stutter sometimes here and there, but it's still very editable. It's just not perfect like the 60. So depending, on how much it has to decode, it does very well, and I'm very impressed to see that an Air, which is the cheapest version of any Apple, I guess, computer, can handle that kind of workload. So I guess what I'm trying to say, guys, is the M1 here is a pretty huge leap for Apple, and I think this is going to really change the industry towards ARM processors. That we can see here that the old Intel style processing is dying out, x86 and whatnot else, but the ARM here is taking over. So I feel like this is the beginnings of this era, and it's only going to get better and a lot more efficient and more enhanced. And also, looking at the performance of this Air, I would predict that in the near future, Apple is going to be #1 by far, not only in just being the best architecture and operating system, but also start taking that space in the gaming industry. Because Apple has never really been about gaming. This new M1 chips just shows a small preview of what these things could be capable of. So who should be getting the first M1s? Well, I think that if you're needing a computer upgrade or your laptop upgraded, this is a no-brainer. And if you want something even more professional, go with the MacBook Pro. It's pretty much the same as this, but it's just more capable and it has a few more features. And not to mention the Pro's battery life is just extraordinary. So I feel like there's two kinds of people that should buy these first three, which is the Air, the Pro, and the Mini. And they're pretty much all identical. Mini being the best performance because of, what it is, but they're all so close as far as everyday use goes. So you're either excited about this and you want to jump on the, new technology and try it out and start using it, or you're someone that actually needs a new laptop specifically in this category. Now, if you're somebody more professional and is using MacBook Pro 16-inch or something like that that's spec'd out, I would not be too in a hurry to jump on this, because waiting a few more months, maybe to the mid of this year, we're going to start seeing some pretty impressive laptops coming out of Apple, which will have the new M1s spec'd up higher. Now, with that said, their price is going to be higher also, so obviously that comes with it. But if you're a professional and you need professional tools, you're probably better off waiting for the complete redesign with the new Apple Silicon architecture. But if you're going to school and you just need a casual laptop because your old one is super old and it's not working, or it's time for an upgrade, or whatever it is, or if you're just curious about the M1, just buy the base version for the $899 if you can get the educational discount, and you will be more than happy, and you wouldn't have overpaid for it. And even if you did want to sell it within, half a year or a year, it'll always be worth, because it's going to be desirable. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this overview of the MacBook Air. I'm very pleased with mine and the way I spec'd it. I think it's perfect for me for the long run, and I think Apple Silicon has a bright future ahead of it. All right, guys, well, thanks for watching. If you did enjoy this video, then hit that like button. And if you are interested in videos like this, I do a lot of interesting things on this channel, so stay tuned. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.